mind-blowing technologies that will change the world. So please, Don, come to the stage here and enlighten us about. Okay, thank you very much. Don will actually appear behind me on video. So, Don, welcome. I can see you now behind me, and we are looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much. Yes, coming to the stage would be a challenge because we don't yet have teleportation. And I'm in Taipei right now. But thank you for that kind introduction. And I listened to the last panel and also the previous speaker, and I think clearly you're having a good discussion at the conference. And I'm sorry that I can't be there with you, but through the magic of the internet, I'm able to talk to you. And I can also hear you too. I don't know if we have time for a Q&A, but let's see how this goes. So you've been talking about a number of exciting technologies. And I work where I advise the World Economic Forum, and Klaus Schwab has written a very good book about the founder of the World Economic Forum, about the fourth industrial age. And just to review for everybody, the first was steam, and we mechanized things like shovels and hoes. The second was electricity, and we created the electrical production line. The third, or the mass production line. The third was the computer. So we have the mainframe, the mini, the PC. During this period, the development of the internet, then the web, the social web, mobility, big data, the cloud, and so on. And now we're moving into a period where, as the previous speaker was discussing, technology is being infused into everything, into the physical world, into our bodies, into every business process. And all of these technologies that you can see on the screen are very exciting. Now, my view of this fourth industrial age is that all of these amazing technologies are only going to be impactful on the economy, excuse me, and on the architecture of the firm, and on the way that we do business, if they have a transactional platform. And I'm here to tell you, in fact, that the internet is entering a second era. And that's based on the underlying technologies of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. It's called the blockchain. And to me, this is the foundation for all of these technologies going forward insofar as they affect the economy. So let me sort of explain this idea for a second. Excuse me. It's actually early in the morning here in Taipei. I started working on the Internet of Information in the 1970s. And that's what we've had since then. And there's a thing about that if I send you some information, whether it's a PDF or email or whatever, I'm actually sending you a copy. Even with a website, I retain the original. We've all had a publishing medium, and that's been great. It's democratized information. But when it comes to things of value in the economy, like assets, money, stocks, bonds, things like loyalty points or intellectual property, or even cultural assets like art or music, or political assets like votes, or material assets like energy or carbon credits or our reputations, sending a copy is a terrible idea. If I send you $100, it's really important that I don't still have the money and that I can send it to somebody else. So this has been called the double spend problem by cryptographers for a long time. And so the way that we solve this problem, the Internet of Information has actually not enabled real peer-to-peer commerce. And as one of the people who invented that concept, that's tough for me to say. But the way that we handle this is that we put all these capabilities in the middle. Banks, governments, credit card companies, social media companies, and they enable us to trust each other. They perform all of the transaction and business logic of every type of commerce. They identify parties and value, money, stocks, so on. They, or music, they clear and settle transactions. They present stuff to us, and they keep records. Now, overall, they've done a pretty good job, but there are growing problems. And of course, we all woke up to this in 2008, when some of these middlemen, Wall Street, almost brought down the global capitalist system. But there are other problems. They have technologies which are insecure. They're based on traditional server technologies, so they can be hacked. Any computer system using today's technology can be hacked. And, JP Morgan, Home Depot, Democratic National Party, even the CIA found that out the hard way. But there are other problems too that show that at minimum, they need a lot of help. I mean, right now they slow things down terribly. It takes a second for an email to go around the world, but it can take days or even weeks for money in computers to move down the street in Sydney or in Melbourne. They tax the system. They can charge 10, 20% just to move money from one country to another. No one ever heard of cross-border email payments, but we have all kinds of cross-border money payments. They exclude a couple of billion people from the global economy. And overall, and this was referred to in the last panel, they capture our data. So we create all this data, but they capture it. And it's created a new asset class. It's probably the biggest asset class in history, most important. And the end result and the upshot, as you have been discussing, is that the benefits of the digital age have been asymmetrical. Again, hard for somebody like me who's been writing about this for 40 years almost, that we now have this crazy situation where we have wealth creation, but we have declining prosperity throughout the developed world and a lot of parts of the developing world. So this is a problem, and that's what's behind all this populism and anger and worse, xenophobia. And I note our host today, that sounds like a Dutch accent, and they just went through this in election, which is a terrifying election, but which had a happy ending. Thanks so much. Mike Myers in Austin Power, Man of Mystery, he does this stupid thing, $1 million, and I hate the Dutch. And he picked on the Dutch because nobody actually hates the Dutch with him. But after that, I tweeted, I love the Dutch. Thank you very much. But anyway, setting that aside, what if there were not just an internet of information? What if there were an internet of value? Some kind of, vast global distributed ledger database, kind of like a global spreadsheet that ran on millions and millions of computers everywhere. And that any asset from money to a stock to a vote to a song could be stored, transacted, managed in a secure and private way. What if there were a native medium for value, like we have a native medium for information? Well, again, perhaps propitiously in the year 2008, an anonymous person or persons named Satoshi Nakamoto wrote a paper outlining a protocol for a new kind of digital cash that he called Bitcoin. And it took a while for people like me to figure it out. I didn't really get into this until about 4 years ago. And along with my son, Alex, we started doing research, and we concluded that this underlying technology for Bitcoin is in fact the second era of the internet. Now, don't be confused by Bitcoin. Bitcoin is an asset. It's like gold. It goes up and down in value. And if you're a speculator in assets, by all means, that's interesting. Bitcoin more broadly is a cryptocurrency. It's not a fiat currency controlled by a nation state. It's controlled by its code. But the real pony here is the underlying technology. And the reason is that now, for the first time in human history, people everywhere and organizations globally can trust each other without an intermediary to do all kinds of commercial activities. And trust it's not achieved by a big intermediary, it's achieved by collaboration, by cryptography, and by some clever code, which is why Alex and I call it the trust protocol. Trust is native to the medium. Now, at this point, everyone's always thinking, even people know about this. Yeah, remind me again, how does that work? Because that sounds, pretty far out there. So let me take 2 minutes to explain one of the blockchains. There are many different types of blockchains, and the way that trust is established and consensus as to the truth is achieved is very different. But let me pick the Bitcoin blockchain because that's currently the biggest one. And it uses a consensus mechanism called proof of work. Mark Twain said, I'm sorry I wrote such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. Well, it's taken me 3 years to be able to say this in 2 minutes. So here we go. Gentlemen, start your engines. No, ladies and gentlemen, check your watches. Here we go. If I send you that $100, that transaction is broadcast out to a global network of millions of computers, all using the highest level of cryptography. And then all around the world are a group of people called miners that have massive computing resources, estimated to be 20 to 100 times bigger than all of Google's resources in the world. It's the biggest computing platform in the world by far. And the miners do a lot of work to find out the truth. And every 10 minutes, kind of like the heartbeat of a network, a block gets created. And that block has all the transactions from the last 10 minutes. So it could be that I send you $100, or that somebody got married, or somebody bought a stock, or someone transferred a house, or they registered a deed. Ultimately, it could be what electrical light bulb bought what power from some distributed power network. And the miners go to work and they compete to try and find out the truth and to validate that block. And the winning miner, to make a long story short, gets some of the cryptocurrency from that platform. And then here's the important part. That block gets connected to the previous block to create a chain of blocks. And if I wanted to hack that block and send that $100 to everybody in the conference room there to commit fraud, I'd have to hack that block plus the previous block, because that block is only relevant if it's referencing the previous block. It's only valid if it references the previous block, kind of like a digital wax seal. I'd have to hack the entire history of commerce on that blockchain, not just on one computer, but across millions of computers, all using the highest level of cryptography, all at the same time, while the most powerful computing resource in the world is watching me to make sure I don't do that. Now, I won't say this is impossible to hack, but it's a lot more secure than the kind of computing systems that you've got in your company today. And I was with Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, yesterday, and I said in a conference, it's kind of like taking a chicken McNugget and trying to turn it back into a chicken. I mean, eventually, maybe somebody can do that, but today it's going to be hard to do that. He laughed out loud and tweeted. I just saw it after I came back to my room. Anyway, so a chain of blocks. That was a little more than 2 minutes, but you get the idea. So Bitcoin is only one blockchain. There are all kinds of them. Ethereum is an amazing platform developed by Vitalik. He was 19 years old. It's quite extraordinary because it has a platform upon which applications can be built very, very effortlessly, and relatively effortlessly. And one of the tools it has is capability for building smart contracts, just like what they sound like. they're agreements between people or organizations that self-execute. They police themselves, and they have the contract as a bank account, so it executes payments as well. And about a month ago, Alex and I were talking to somebody who showed us, a developer, who showed us that he had built what Alex estimated to be about 60% of the functionality of the New York Stock Exchange on an Ethereum platform. So once he's done, you don't need the New York Stock Exchange. And we probed it, and we were quite blown away by the whole thing. He did this on Ethereum. And I asked him, how long did it take to do this? And he said, I just did it on the weekend for fun. So Ethereum's quite amazing. Now, there are other platforms too. Hyperledger is very important, developed by the Linux Foundation. And this is IBM's big entry into this marketplace. And IBM, as we know, is the most important technology company. We're all in the enterprise. So, and Hyperledger is about building enterprise-ready applications. So there's lots of excitement about this. I mean, the Economist did a cover story. They called it the trust machine, the great chain of being sure about things. And now even Dilbert's involved. So, there's the hype circle's getting there. Manager, I think we should build a blockchain. Dilbert, uh-oh. Does he understand what he said, or is it something he saw in a trade magazine? At Dilbert, what color do you want your blockchain? Manager says, I think mauve has the most RAM. So in this room, you know who you are in this picture. You're one of these. Of course, the manager is totally wrong, because everyone in this room, I'll bet, knows that mauve does not have the most RAM. Chartreuse, clearly, has the most RAM. So about 2 years ago, Alex and I started doing a dozen research projects, and it ended up with this book, Blockchain Revolution, which was published quite quickly in Down Under in Australia. I'm very pleased to do that. And it has been a bestseller in Australia, and it continues to be a bestseller around the world. I mean, on Amazon, it's on digital currencies. It's the #1 book, the #2 book, and the #4 book right now. The different, the paperback, the hardcover, the audio, and the Kindle version. In Canada, it was competing with Harry Potter and an adult coloring book as the #1 book. I don't know if you have those in Australia. I didn't even know what an adult coloring book is. Anyway, and damn you, Harry Potter. Brr. Anyway, I'm very proud of this book. And I've written 16 books. Half of them have been big global bestsellers. And this may well be my most important book. And some of you may remember I wrote the first bestseller about the web in business. It was called The Digital Economy. That was in '94. And I'm happy, and maybe I got lucky that I wrote the first bestseller about the second era. So let's talk about what does all this mean. By the way, the best way to get that book in Australia is in massive volume, large numbers. Christmas is coming soon. I know for a fact a lot of you in that room have friends. Serious. So most people think, well, this is about financial services, isn't it? What about fintech? How does blockchain relate to fintech? Well, I view fintech as being a subset of blockchain. Yeah, there are a few technologies that are also important to fintech besides blockchain, but this is fundamentally about a new transactional platform for financial services. And do any of you recognize this machine on the screen? It actually has a name. It's called a Rube Goldberg machine. This guy, Rube Goldberg, invented all these crazy machines that were super complicated, and they did a very simple thing. Well, I look at this and I see the banking industry. I mean, it's super complicated, but it doesn't do very complicated things when you think about it. When you tap your card in a Starbucks, and these messages go through 8 different computers, or companies, actually, all these counterparties, each with their own risk and latency. And some of them are using 1970s mainframes. And then 3 days later, a settlement occurs. Well, what if there were a blockchain platform for financial services? There would be no 3-day clearing and settlement because the payment and the settlement would be the same activity, just a change in the database. So in the book, we talk about the 8 things that this industry does. And this is it. I mean, this is what the industry does. It authenticates and attests the value. So you are who you are. This is a real, Aussie dollar, and so on. It transfers value, moves money, moves stocks, and all kinds of value. It stores value, bank accounts, etc. It lends value because it stores it, it gets to lend it. It exchanges value, stock markets, various kinds of exchanges, funds and invests value, venture capital, mutual funds, hedge funds, private equity, and so on. It insures value and manages risks, all the big insurance companies and banks. Some banks do this, many countries. And then it accounts for value and audits value, largely the big auditing companies. Well, in the book, we show how blockchain can basically, in theory, eliminate each of these. And on the other hand, how the incumbents, if they were smart, could use this technology to fundamentally reinvent banking. So I don't know, you take any one of these. I can't go through them all now, but let's take the last one, auditing and accounting for value. We've had double entry accounting for 300 years. This was the foundation of capitalism and the creation of the corporation, kind of important. Debit and a credit. Well, with blockchains, you enter a debit or a credit, you get a third entry automatically in the blockchain. That means that you don't really need an audit at the end of each year because you have a real-time audit all day long. And not only that, it's not like a sample of transactions like big auditors do at the end of the year. It's every transaction that's occurred for the company. So this is going to disrupt things considerably. I know you're a Prime Minister, Malcolm Gladwell, and right now we're trying to engage him and thinking about what this might mean for Australia. But you have an Auditor General who comes in at the end of the year and finds all these problems. 14 months later, misappropriation of this and that. Well, you don't really need an Auditor General. You need someone to just be tracking stuff real time, all the time, and you can stop things before they get carried away. So let me just end by quickly going through 8 business models that we talk about in the book. And each of these are becoming very disruptive. This is not something in the future. This is something that's starting to happen right now. And I wanted to start with today's big disruptors that everybody talks about. And that's the so-called sharing economy. Companies like Uber or Airbnb. Well, with respect, I don't view these as sharing economy companies. I think they're successful precisely because they don't share. They aggregate services together and they sell them. That's created a $75 billion service aggregator called Uber. Well, what if, say, Airbnb were not a $30 billion company? What if it were a distributed app with some smart contracts on a blockchain? A blockchain could do most of what the company Airbnb does, turning all the owners of rooms and homes into a cooperative. Now, the way it would work is, it's just a database. So you check your database and you want to stay in Melbourne or something, and here are the days, and you find a place. That's a cool place on the screen. And you book it, and then that initiates a smart contract. You show up, you turn the key in the door, and that initiates a partial payment. And you're there, you enjoy the place, you do some kind of other things in the smart contract to validate you haven't messed the place up. You leave the door, you turn the key, the full payment is executed, and you loved it. Look at it, it's beautiful. So you can do a 5-star rating on the ledger. It's an immutable ledger, and it's done. So this is the big Silicon Valley disruptors are now in danger of being disrupted, and they know that. Airbnb is a good company, and that's why it's now acquired a significant blockchain expertise. Now, there's a dark side to all of this too. I mean, initially that creates a cooperative for all the Uber drivers, but just like Airbnb becomes B Airbnb, Uber becomes Super, as Super Uber, as we said in the book. And this is autonomous vehicles. It won't even be a steering wheel. So it's a big problem. And, 48 of 50 US states, the number one job type is truck drivers. That's pretty much going to be gone. I think we will see structural unemployment. Hard for me to say. 40 years I've been, hey, it's all creative destruction. Blows out the old stuff, but you get all these new jobs and new opportunities created. I've studied the data. That's not going to happen this time. So I'm happy to talk about that if we have time at the end. So number two, the rights creators. There are all these people in our economy who create value, but who don't get to have don't get to share in the value that they create. So I'm talking about, a lot of scientists, journalists, artists. They're really big on these musicians. And let's say songwriters as a case in point. The Internet of Information broke our intellectual property regime because we didn't have an internet of value that could protect these assets. So we all published, like we published PDFs, sent them to other people, and we published music. The difference is a PDF may be an interesting information artifact, but someone's music is their intellectual property. So if you wrote a hit song 45 years ago, you wrote a hit song 45 years ago. It's kind of weird because I can't hear you. I don't even know if you're still in the room. But you would receive 45,000 US dollars in royalties. If you write a hit song today, you don't get $45,000, you get about $35. So the poor musicians are left picking up crumbs at the end of the whole process. So Imogen Heap is a singer-songwriter who has created a platform called Mycelium. And that platform enables people to post music and she's posted a song already, and the song is inside a smart contract. And the smart contract specifies all the intellectual property rights of the song. And if you want to just listen to it, maybe it's free. You want to put it in your movie, then it costs this. And because the song has a bank account, money flows into the song. The way she describes it is that the song sort of acts as a business, protecting her rights and doing things for her. So this is happening now with all kinds of artifacts, not just music, but art. Consider something like a piece of art. You're a great artist, or you're an upcoming artist, you sell a work for $200, and then 10 years later, it's worth $2 million or something. Maybe you could have a residual interest in the art. So as the art moves through the art world, it's resold, it's in a gallery, whatever, then and then it's resold for a lot of money. You might get a piece of that. This is a piece of art that I have. This is in my home, and it's 1/10 of an original piece. And when the original piece gets sold, the value of my art goes up. There are all kinds of complicated things that can be done like that. So I'm going to just move ahead here. Many of these communities like Linux.
Don, can you please keep an eye on time, please? We're running out of time here. It's very interesting, but we're running out of time, sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm still on time according to how much time I've been allocated. So why don't you tell me how much time do I have left?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Oh, okay. Well, let me just flip through these quite quickly then. Reintermediators, creating new value in the middle. There are all kinds of opportunities for the disintermediation of the old, like Western Union. Now you can send your money securely, and not pay 10%. And it doesn't take 4 to 7 days to arrive. It takes a point and a half. It costs a point and a half, and it takes a day. The old industrial power grid can be distributed by, changed by distributed micro power grids. I think blockchains will transform supply chains. And you can see this already. It's underway. Oil and gas, big initiatives in that area. Imagine if you knew the provenance of your hamburger and what animal it came from and what the animal was fed and so on. Walmart testing blockchain technology for supply chain. It's the biggest supply chain in the world. It's moving to blockchain. I'm in Taiwan right now. The biggest electronic supply chain in the world is a Taiwanese company called Foxconn that makes your iPhone. And they're now investigating supply chain too. In fact, we even have supply chains for tracking diamonds. I heard you talking about the Internet of Things. Well, the Internet of Everything will need a ledger of everything, because when your light bulb buys some power from a distributed power grid, it won't go through the Visa network. There are all these organizations that are creating platforms now. The Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, amazing organization. Hyperledger is another one. These great companies like Block. Tendermint was just launched today in a crowdfunding campaign. I haven't been able to check on how it's doing, but this is an inter-blockchain connector. And then we've got these cool companies like Consensus building amazing applications. WeFund, one of the most exciting crowdfunding campaigns and platforms ever. I think there'll be more funds raised for investment in the blockchain space using initial coin offerings like the one that happened today for Tendermint than traditional venture capital. Other amazing companies like Nuco, the government of Abu Dhabi is moving totally to this kind of platform. We also in the book talk about how blockchains can be turned into platforms for you to make your consumers producers or prosumers, as I've described them. And Nike is already doing initiatives in that regard. We have data partners. And you were talking earlier about privacy and big data and so on. I think that this is a big problem. We have these data frackers today that dig deep into the ground to find data. And this is an example of one. Whoops, they see everyone on Twitter as a censor, and they've identified a pattern. And so CNN is a user of data miner, and CNN sends a crew out, and sure enough, there's an explosion that's taken place, and they're there before the police are even there. Facebook being the ultimate data fracker. Well, what if each of us owned our own data? And there are projects on blockchains underway now to create a platform whereby your identity is owned by you and managed by you in a black box. And your identity is very stingy. It reaches out and conducts transactions, but in many cases, it doesn't even have to say who you are. If I'm a seller, I don't really need to know who you are. I just need to know that I got paid. That's cryptographic proof. And so we're going to start to see these personal identities that are owned by citizens collecting data and protecting their privacy. It's a very exciting development. It means that data management is changing quite fundamentally too. And then finally, we have big changes in the public sector. Maybe for another time, the government of Estonia is already doing this stuff. Watch out for Carbonex, doing an initial coin offering probably next week. The government of Dubai is moving fully to blockchains. We have a big problem with the crisis of legitimacy that exists in our democratic institutions now around the world. And blockchains can help those. E-voting will never happen without blockchain-based systems. And then finally, we can reinvent central banks. I was meeting here with central bankers yesterday. Imagine if the Australian Central Bank adopted a cryptocurrency for the digital dollar. This could change the way they manage the money supply and do a lot of other things. So there you go. There are 8 new business models. And when you get a paradigm shift, this always causes a crisis of leadership. And vested interests fight against change. So I agreed before that the future is not something to be predicted, it's something to be achieved. And it's up to us to build this new future. So I certainly wish you well.
Thank you very much, Don. I think this was an absolutely fantastic insight in some of these things. I absolutely didn't know that blockchain was already that far advanced and that so many systems already are built around it. It's just fascinating to see the future actually happening. So thank you very much, and sorry that I had to push you along a little bit, but we have such a tight program. We've got such interesting speakers. We don't want to stop them. But thank you very much. Thanks Don, once again, please.
Thanks very much. Bye.